Hello there, this is Synopsis. This video will be part 1 of a series analyzing the politics and philosophy of Metal Gear Rising, one of my favorite games and one that has been having a well-deserved renaissance lately. I'm not sure what exactly caused this nearly decade-old game's resurgence, although I do have my own theories, but several extremely high-quality YouTube videos of the last year and huge streamers replaying the game certainly don't hurt. A lot has already been covered in the many videos about the game that have come out the past year, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'm going to focus on things which I surprisingly haven't seen discussed. I've seen Armstrong compared to libertarian politicians or Trump for trying to make America great again, but I haven't seen a video point out the themes of existentialism versus objectivism between Raiden and Armstrong. I've seen videos that point out Monsoon calling memes the DNA of the soul is hilarious, but I've never seen a video point out that he was talking about this kind of meme, not that kind. So we'll be focusing on more subtle points the game is making about society and the philosophy of its characters. Another thing I'll mention before diving into the video is that I'll be playing this one straight with the political and philosophical assignments of the characters based on their words and actions as well as the subtext surrounding them. Most of my videos have a fair bit of crowbarring political philosophies or theories into characters that don't explicitly have anything to do with them, which I'll refrain from in this one, much to the joy of Redditors who don't appreciate it when you call their favorite video game character a communist. Lastly, I want to warn you that this game has a hard M rating with lots of blood, dismemberment, and libertarian/objectivist philosophy, so viewer discretion is advised. So with all that said, let's begin. The game starts off 4 years after the events of Metal Gear Solid 4 in an unnamed African country which has been rebuilding after the Guns of the Patriots incident. To fully explain what that was, I'd have to explain the plot of every Metal Gear Solid game, which I haven't made videos about yet, so I'll try to make a concise TLDR. In Metal Gear Solid 4, almost all of the world's military conflicts were proxy wars carried out by private military corporations, or PMCs, instead of nations. All the individual weapons in the world, from small arms to vehicles to weapons of mass destruction such as the eponymous Metal Gears, were controlled by the Sons of the Patriot system, or just the system, which had absolute control of every single one of these weapons, down to restricting their use to individual soldiers. Each soldier was injected with nanomachines which controlled who could access which weapons as well as provide control over the soldier's emotions and biology, such as injecting them with adrenaline or suppressing fear, pain, or trauma responses in battle. The system was thought to be foolproof and lessen indiscriminate violence by restricting access to weapons and controlling the actions of individual soldiers, but eventually, one man whose mother chose to name him Liquid Ocelot managed to take control of the 5 largest PMCs, giving him control over most of the world's soldiers and weapons, eclipsing even the US military. While Solid Snake and the other antagonists think Liquid Ocelot's plan is to take over the world with his massive army, his plan was actually to liberate the world from the Patriots, a mysterious Illuminati-type group that ran the system as well as controlled the US government and even controlled its culture and the internet from the shadows. Reddit mods basically. Ultimately, the Patriots set a series of events in motion which lead Solid Snake being sent to kill Liquid Ocelot, which he succeeded at, but also led to the destruction of the artificial intelligences that controlled the system and the dissolution of the Patriots, which caused the first complete ceasefire in the history of humanity as all weapons were linked to the system. Fast forward 4 years and most of the world has recovered from the proxy wars and influence of the Patriots, leading to a period of relative peace. Our protagonist, Raiden, is a member of Maverick, what is now referred to as a private security provider, a politically correct way to distance groups like it from the PMCs of earlier. Maverick and Raiden have helped train the army of the unnamed African country, and Prime Minister Nemani thanks them. Raiden shares one of his favorite quotes, "One sword keeps another in the sheath." This is one of the first indications we get about Raiden's personal philosophy. He values the preservation of life and is willing to use violence to protect it. He compares his views to the code the samurai lived by, hinting that he lives his life according to a personal sense of morality, not just what society expects of him. Their conversation is cut short when a man blocks the convoy. He slowly approaches and draws his sword, ignoring the APC driver's warnings to clear the road. "Is that fucking Markiplier?" the gunner wonders to himself. The man, who may or may not be Markiplier, suddenly starts dashing towards the convoy, avoiding machine gun fire and leaping high into the air before landing on the vehicle and effortlessly turning the gunner into cyber sashimi. More APCs zoom forward and soldiers pour out to reinforce the convoy. The armored limo carrying Raiden and the VIPs quickly turn around and follow an escape route to keep the Prime Minister safe. The unknown cyborg flashes his teeth with a shit-eating grin that would even make Joe Biden jealous before making short work of the soldiers Raiden just got done training. As the convoy is making its escape, an RPG damages the lead vehicle and more cyborgs with swords attack the soldiers. The limo tries to make an improvised escape route before being blocked in by semi-trucks, barriers, and even more ninjas. These guys have more ninjas than Season 2 of Daredevil. Boris, the leader of Maverick, decides it's time to send in the A-Team. Raiden stomps out of the limo, crushing the pavement with his high heels, and gracefully throws off his one-piece suit, revealing an upgraded cyborg body, complete with a lower jaw and a right arm. He unsheaths his sword's sheath before unsheathing his sword and does the "I'm not racist but" meme for good measure. With 2 quick swings of his sword, he slices the nearby wall into 74 pieces to block the path of the limo before challenging the enemy ninjas. Raiden makes short work of them before running to catch up with Nemani's elite cyborg guards. As they cut down the last of the ninjas, an ominous sound emanates from the ocean, revealing itself to be an unmanned Metal Gear Ray. As they run back to the limo to protect the Prime Minister from this new threat, they are interrupted by a hulk of a cyborg falling from the sky, disarming one of the guards as he lands. The guard is so shocked by this that he doesn't have time to pick up his sword with his feet and fight back, and he is quickly sliced up like pizza. The other guard quickly engages the cyborg, who is way faster than he looks. The guard's underestimation cost him an arm, and the supersized cyborg steals Ryuko's scissor blade before inventing the best reaction meme of all time and lopping the guard's head off. The cyborg, whose name is Sundowner, I'm just gonna call him Sundowner from now on to humanize him. Sundowner grabs the Prime Minister from the limo and holds him up the way a shirtless man on Tinder holds up a fish. Just then, Raiden catches up and sees he is probably getting fired from his job of protecting Nemani. Sundowner says he wants to kill the Prime Minister because Africa is getting a little bit too peaceful and that business hasn't been good for cyborg mercenaries since the fall of SOP. He leaps away with Nemani and sends the unmanned Metal Gear, which they call UGs now, to block Raiden's pursuit. If you haven't played Metal Gear Solid 2 or 4, Metal Gear Ray models are like this basically top-of-the-line anti-Metal Gear Metal Gears, and the last boss in MGS2, where Raiden has to fight between a few and a couple dozen of these things, and that was before Raiden had his cyborg body. Since this isn't as much of a challenge to Raiden as it looks and basically amounts to a tutorial boss fight to show you how to fight big stuff, this is a good time to discuss why there are weapons and PMCs all over the place, not to mention terrorists with Metal Gears, after the fall of the system and all weapons on Earth being effectively disarmed. A side effect of the end of SOP was the end of the war economy, which Sundowner mentioned and was an important theme in MGS4. Basically, the war economy is kind of similar to the economy in the real world today, with a big chunk of the global GDP being spent on military expenses and it being so large that it can't really be decoupled without having drastic effects on the global economy. The war economy in the Metal Gear Solid series is basically that, but on a much larger scale and carried out purposefully by AIs rather than incidentally by arms manufacturing corporations and war profiteering capitalists. Or maybe we do have capitalists in the real world using machine learning to institute a planned economy focused on making as much money as possible regardless of how much blood is shed instead of distributing all the material goods people need. Who knows? In any case, the 4-year period after the fall of SOP led to a sharp decline in profits for arms manufacturers and PMCs, as well as power vacuums all over the world due to the dissolution of most of the world's private militaries. The game doesn't explicitly say how the war economy status quo ended up back in place, or worse in some ways, after having most of the world's weapons inoperable and most of the world's combat forces disbanded. Either Snake's weapon laundering friend Drebin has been very busy the last 4 years, or the massive power vacuum previously filled by capitalists running private militaries for profit was filled by other capitalists running private militaries for profit. The weapons and vehicles, and even the Metal Gears belonging to Ocelot's PMCs were probably auctioned off, and I imagine whatever system Drebin had for removing weapon locks was done en masse to utilize many of the old weapons, but 4 years is probably enough time to rebuild the world's arsenal in any case. The weapons manufacturers and PMCs may not be as profitable as they used to be, but they do have some clever ways to make up some of that income, such as introducing nanomachine and cyborg technologies to new sectors such as policing or even civilians, as we'll see more of later. I think it's an interesting point Metal Gear Rising makes about the consequences of the privatization of militaries. If you could push a button that removed all guns, tanks, and nukes from the world instantly, how long do you think things would stay that way? You don't have to be a crazy socialist like me to realize that all of those things would start getting rebuilt the next day. Removing all the weapons doesn't remove the fact that there are powerful people and corporations whose fortunes were built on war and its perpetuation, and under capitalism, all the incentive in the world to continue to profit from it. This all may sound preachy, but I'm including all of this because the evils of privatization of militaries and arms manufacturing is one of the main themes of Metal Gear Solid 4 and Metal Gear Rising, which are linked together more than any other MGS games besides maybe Peace Walker and Metal Gear Solid 5. While Hideo Kojima wasn't very involved in the development of MGR, Platinum Games clearly wanted to keep his presence, and so it keeps the anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism themes present in all the Metal Gear Solid games. You would think that was enough to put the UG Ray out of commission, but this is a Metal Gear Solid game, where losing a limb or two rarely slows anyone down. Raiden pursues Sundowner for a bit before being interrupted by the UG again and has to put it down for good. So this is a good opportunity to talk about Raiden, his history leading up to this point, and how it shaped his personal history. Raiden, whose real name is Jack, was born in Liberia in 1983. When he was only a small child, his parents were killed by a man called Solidus, who took Jack in and raised him as a child soldier who later fought in the Liberian Civil War. He excelled at killing, even as a young boy, and was in charge of a regiment of other child soldiers by the age of 10. He earned the nicknames Jack the Ripper and the White Devil due to his high body count and being one of the few white people in Liberia. He became skilled with guns, but even more so blades, as Solidus had taught him that they were a more noble weapon than guns. When the war was over, he was placed in a relief center and later relocated to the United States by an NGO, which was actually a Patriots front used to acquire children for experimentation. The Patriots sent Jack through counseling to help with the trauma of being a child soldier, and also an early generation of nanomachines which were less sophisticated than the ones involved in SOP. As a young man, Jack was haunted by his past, often suffering from nightmares of his mostly repressed childhood. When he was old enough, he joined the military, where his skills were recognized and he was assigned to a special U.S. Army task force that trained with advanced virtual reality simulations. He underwent over 300 of these simulations, including recreations of the legendary Solid Snake's mission during the Shadow Moses incident, in which he stopped a terrorist group from holding the world hostage with nuclear weapons. Later, Jack was recruited to Foxhound, a special forces unit that officially no longer existed due to their involvement with the Shadow Moses incident. As part of his work with them, he was sent on a mission that would later be called the Big Shell incident, which is what most of Metal Gear Solid 2 is about. The events of the incident are very complicated and would take an entire video on their own to explain, but the short version is this. An oil tanker was sunk in the New York harbor by terrorists in possession of the first Metal Gear Ray, and Solid Snake, who was there to try to stop them, was framed for the whole thing and labeled a terrorist. The sinking of the tanker led to thousands of gallons of crude oil being spilled into the New York harbor, and a cleanup and containment facility called Big Shell was constructed. 2 years later, while the US president was doing an inspection tour of the facility, a group of terrorists, including the Special Forces Unit Dead Cell and Russian private army members, took control of the facility and over 20 people hostage, including the president, for a $30 billion ransom. The leader of the group was allegedly Solid Snake. Jack, who was given his codename Raiden during this mission, was sent to infiltrate the facility and rescue the hostages. He faced off against an army of soldiers, battled a vampire, met the real Solid Snake, defused C4 which had been placed throughout the facility, fought a magic invincible lady, killed Dead Cell's explosives expert, and met a cyborg ninja. And this was years before it was normal to see cyborg ninjas everywhere. The cyborg ninja would turn out to be Olga Gerlukovich, a double agent that is seemingly working with the terrorists but is actually a Patriot spy sent to assist Raiden in his mission. Olga's daughter, whom she has never met, is being held hostage by the Patriots to force her to work with them. Raiden eventually makes it to the president, who explains who the Patriots are to Raiden, that they control the US political process, economy, and military from behind the scenes, and that even the president is just a pawn that they select. The Patriots are building a massive submarine fortress called Arsenal Gear under the Big Shell, and it has the capability to launch nuclear weapons, but its real purpose is to censor and filter the internet to shape the flow of history by controlling what people say on Twitter and YouTube, kind of like what Elon Musk wants to do. Ocelot shows up and shoots the president, who tells Raiden he must find Emma Emmerich, the chief architect of the artificial intelligence on board Arsenal Gear, before dying. Raiden later finds Emma, who has a virus which can control the Arsenal Gear AI, but is stabbed by the vampire, whom Raiden kills again, and Emma is only able to partially upload the virus before dying from her wound. Raiden and Solid Snake decide that killing Solidus and his men is the only way to stop them, so they head towards Arsenal Gear, but Raiden is captured and tortured by Ocelot and Solidus, who reveals he was the one who raised Raiden and taught him everything he knew knew as a child soldier, which Raiden doesn't remember due to repressed memories and the Patriots fucking with his head. After they leave, Olga shows up and frees him, telling him she is helping him to get to Snake, who is waiting for him. Raiden, who is currently naked after his captors took his clothes and gear, sneaks onto Arsenal Gear where he meets up with Snake, who has his gear and a sword that would later become Raiden's signature weapon. Raiden would then face off against a Metal Gear Raise before succumbing to exhaustion, and he is about to be killed by Solidus when Olga shows up to help him, blowing her cover to save her child, whom the Patriots planned to kill if Raiden failed his mission. Solidus kills Olga and orders the Metal Gear Raise to kill Raiden, but Emma's virus takes partial effect and the Raise malfunction. Solidus's forces captured Snake while Raiden was fighting the Raise, and Solidus reveals his true plan to Raiden and Snake. He wants to use the power of Arsenal Gear's AI to find out the identities of the Patriots so he can kill them. Ocelot then reveals himself as a Patriots operative and that the whole Big Shell incident was set up by them so they could get Raiden to kill Solidus, before setting Arsenal Gear on a collision course into Manhattan and escaping on board one of the Rays. The submarine crashed into Manhattan, and Raiden and Solidus faced off in their final battle atop it. Solidus reveals that he kills Raiden's parents, and this, combined with the knowledge that Olga's child would die if he failed, filled him with rage, and he struck Solidus through with his sword, leading him to fall off Arsenal Gear and die. Okay, so that was a bit longer of a TLDR than I was going for, but it's important to understand Raiden's origin story to understand why he developed the philosophical views he would later hold. Raiden is an existentialist. The basic idea behind existentialism is a rejection of Platonic and Aristotelian ideas of essentialism, which basically propose that every object, including people, have innate characteristics and purpose which define them. French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, whose name is probably familiar if you've played Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, proposed the inverse of this idea, coining the famous phrase, "existence precedes essence." What he meant was that people aren't born with destinies or innate purpose, or really even a point to life itself. Being born happens first, and then a sense of purpose is developed after. The idea that there is no inherent point or purpose to anything was a radical idea at the time, and existentialist philosophers called this idea of trying to find purpose in a world without it the absurd. While some existentialist philosophers focused on the more nihilistic implications of a world without meaning, others, like Sartre, focused on the radical sense of freedom and responsibility this gave us. He believed that man is condemned to be free, by which he meant it is on each individual person to develop their own sense of purpose in spite of having no innate one. He thought that to live a good life was to achieve self-actualization of the purpose you have given yourself. He used the phrase bad faith to describe people who just go with the flow and live life according to however society, their parents, or their church say they should, rather than according to their own rules, their own nature. Raiden has made it his purpose in life to be an agent of justice. His childhood was stolen from him, and he was made into a butcher, fighting for a madman rather than for himself. Then, he was taken in by the Patriots, who further molded him into a tool for powerful men to use for their own ends. As a young man in the army, he fought for the United States and its oligarchs. Even his mission during the Big Shell incident was, unbeknownst to him, just another instance of him being a pawn of the Patriots, not living according to his own ideals. He had lived most of his life in bad faith, but the Big Shell mission is what turned him into an existentialist. He decided to live life for himself as a result of that mission and pursue justice for other people who have been harmed by the Patriots, especially children. Basically, everything he did in between Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Rising is in pursuit of that goal. He did eventually rescue Olga's child, named Sonny, from the Patriots, but at great cost to himself. He was captured by them again, and they experimented on him much more extensively than they did as a child, removing his brain and spine from his body and placing him in a cyborg body, which was a brand new technology at the time. He was later rescued by a group called Paradise Lost and then went underground for several years, helping people around the world until the Guns of the Patriots incident, in which he saved Snake several times and helped him save the world and defeat the Patriots. After all of that, he got a more human-like cyborg body so that he could live a more normal life and fight for justice without freaking people out, which is eventually what led him to joining Maverick to help rebuild after the fall of the system, leading us to the start of Metal Gear Rising where we are now. With the UG finally dealt with, Raiden finally starts to catch up with Sundowner. That is until Sundowner jumps like 100 feet in the air onto a moving train. Raiden does some anime running up the side of the building and manages to make the Great Leap as well. Once on the train, more anime running ensues until Raiden finally catches up with Sundowner, the Prime Minister, and the cyborg that attacked the convoy in the first place, known as Jetstream Sam. Declaring he doesn't need the Prime Minister anymore, Sundowner runs his sword along his lower jaw, clearly delighting in the torment. He then has a little monologue about war profiteering and the old war economy. So pretty average neocon stuff here. Sundowner wants to make a power vacuum in Nemani's country which will lead to possible military coups and PMC involvement in the area. This is what he meant when he said Africa's gotten a little too peaceful, as that fragile peace will be shattered no matter what results from the Prime Minister's death.
Mind if I got in?
Oh, Markiplier's got jokes.
All we're saying, give war a chance!
Jesus, dude.
No! All yours, Sam! Let's go.
Furious at the death of Namani and his inability to save him, Raiden engaged Sam. While initially confident in his ability, Raiden noticed that his opponent doesn't have a health bar, which is never a good sign. Surely his desire for bringing this sinister cyborg to justice will overpower his opponent's base desire to start a new war for profit. Then Raiden noticed that he was taking damage from his opponent even when parrying his attacks. That's not good at all.
Oh, I see. You deny your weapon its purpose.
This is an interesting point that Sam makes. He's calling Raiden out for acting in bad faith and his unwillingness to fully commit to the violence and conviction that is sometimes necessary to enact justice. In a lot of ways, Sam mirrors Raiden as an existentialist that is pursuing his own sense of justice, but I'll leave that for a later video in the series.
It yearns to bathe in the blood of your enemies, but you hold it back. No. My sword is a tool of justice.
Disarmed and losing blood fast, Raiden would have to defeat this guy fast before he reaches the end of the line. Flailing around to no avail, the cyborg swordsman knocks him to the edge of the train and prepares to deliver the coup de grace. As fate would have it, they emerged from the tunnel at that moment and the swordsman realized that the cavalry had arrived. Boris arrived just in time with Maverick forces to fire heavy machine gun fire at Raiden's assailant. This pushed him back and gave Raiden the opportunity to get back on the train, right before a VTOL aircraft extracted the swordsman. Boris breaks out the big guns and fires a homing rocket at the fleeing vehicle, but it looks like they came prepared. Raiden clenched his fist in anger at his own failure. He failed to save Namani, failed to stop his killer, and he failed at living up to his own ideals of justice, almost getting killed in the process. As he was passing out from blood loss, he vowed revengeance on this new PMC and swore he would avenge Namani. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment on which member of Desperado has the nicest smile, and stay tuned for the next video in the series where we will further analyze existentialist philosophy, particularly focusing on the absurd, as well as the notion of free will and whether it's possible for both man and machine alike. Peace.